CMO, but also the folks at John Hancock as well, who used to work with you at some point of time. So thanks for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today and to have this conversation.
Awesome. Okay, the thing that, at least from my perspective, why I was excited about was it looks like the company Rocket Software was existent for 30 plus years, but the marketing team was officially formed, I think 6, 7 years back, and it's already scaled from probably 1 person team to a 30 plus member team, if I'm correct, right? So I just want to sort of understand this journey that sort of the company is on, and sort of hear your perspective on how does it all work, right? Now you've scaled the marketing team significantly over the last several years.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So Rocket is 34 years old. It started in someone's garage, like it usually, like a lot of tech companies do. You
Right.
hear that story. And it was really an engineer-led organization. It was focused on developers and engineers, and it really worked closely with IBM as a big partner. And the direct go-to-market focus wasn't needed. It didn't start off that way. But then slowly, as the organization grew and we did more and more acquisitions and more, companies that grew in size and it grew in revenue, that direct motion needed to be there. And so when you think about that, you think about go to market, you need to have a strong sales organization. You need to have a strong marketing organization. And that was really why the marketing team started to grow 6 years ago. And then with our current CMO, with Barbara Goose, who I report to as the vice president of growth marketing, she really started to expand that team. And we said, all right, if we need to, grow X% every single year, what's the skill set that we need? What are the gaps? What is a good and great go-to-market motion look like? And what are those, how would we look at our organization? So the way that we've thought about forming the team is my team's growth marketing, which focuses on pipeline growth, which is field marketing, how do we map one-to-one with those AEs, which are the account executives in the regions, to grow that pipeline and close deals. So they map really closely, looking at overall ABM strategies, overall event strategies. Then we have the demand team that looks at how do you generate demand across that whole organization. What is best practices when you're thinking about an enterprise level CIO, CTO? It's much different than like a traditional SaaS model where you're like, okay, I can deal with like just trying to get people to my website and fill out forms. Like we're dealing with a much different audience, and you have to behave differently. Then also the team thinks about, okay, really, really important. One of the first things we did is, what are the analytics? What are the measurements? How do you look at success? And we'll talk probably a little bit about this today, is like, how do you look at ROI? How do you look at what's working and what's not working, so that you can really optimize your go-to-market? How do you think about your tech stack? So that MarTech area, and how do you think about your website? But then really important, so that's the growth team, really important is like, how do you then grow that product marketing team too? How do you think about what is the right value prop, the right messaging? How do you then make sure that you have the right comms that goes in the market and the right brand team? So really the team grew from about 1 to 2 people to roughly about 70 people. As you start to say, like, how do you build a holistic marketing team that focuses all the way from awareness down to customer retention and expansion?
That's a great point, Aurea. And you mentioned a couple of interesting points there. Like, I'm assuming that the demand team and the field marketing team closely works with you, right? If I'm correct, in your role, the demand and field marketing team work closely with you?
Yeah, so they roll up directly to me. And the way that we think about the demand team is like, they come up with the overall centralized campaign. So what is that centralized campaign going against? We have a lot of products at Rocket. We have a ton of products. We have 1,000 products, right? There's so many products. How do you package that in solution level selling? So it's an easier conversation for the sales team. So that demand team comes up with the centralized, and then they work closely with their field marketing team to say, how do we regionalize it? What do we need to do in Brazil? What do we need to do in Germany? What do we need to do in the UK? So that we can have something that's going to speak and resonate with that audience, rather than just having something come straight out of the States that might have that point of view. How do you make sure that it resonates with the audience and it comes to them authentically.
Very helpful, Arya. I have a two follow-up questions on this piece that you mentioned. One is, you made an interesting point earlier about like, hey, the demand gen team obviously is involved in like planning campaigns, creating demand, but also the field marketing team is working closely with the reps to map accounts one to one and figuring out programs that helps them get into those accounts. What does that look like, Arya? What does that motion look like? Is it sort of primarily like, hey, let's sit down together, plan for this quarter, figure out what dinners, events we need to invite these people to, and get FaceTime, or is something else? Like, how do you sort of think about that field marketing and sales coordination?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. It's the other hand of the coin, right? So we need to be like this.
Right.
So what we're actually doing is that we do it in year advance.
Mm.
So what we're saying right now is, what are the events that we need to be at in 2025?
Mm.
And we think of events not just as one single moment, but they're a campaign. So there's something that happens over 3 months. So right now we're in the annual planning. We're saying, okay, what are our big bets that we're going to place to get this CIO, CTO audience that we need? What are then the top accounts that we're going to go after? And those become our invite lists for dinners. Those become our invite lists for where we focus our events so that we know based on the heat map of where they are, oh, we're going to do some sort of, for example, we're doing a Porsche racetrack event right now. We're focusing that Porsche racetrack event in Atlanta because we have a lot of customers there.
Mm-hmm.
We're really, really specific and intentional about where we plan those pieces. So that's what goes into this right now, is we're saying, what in 25, what are our goals? Where do we need to be? What is the heat map? What are the targeted accounts? What is the message that we are going to bring into there? How do we show up as a speaker? How do we show up in really meaningful ways? And then at the event, who's going to be there? Who are the main people based on that? The target audience is going to be there. They're going to be in that place. And then the most important piece is what happens after.
Right.
So what do you do in the post? How do you make sure that you are going exactly after those people with the most relevant conversations, that they're leading to executive briefings, they're leading to discussions that can then also have a really long-term partnership? We pride ourselves on our customer success metrics. We have a 99% customer satisfaction rate, which is huge. So how do we continue to build those partnerships so that we can work with them, our clients and customers, on whatever their roadmap is? So we're less of a vendor relationship, and really what we want to be is that partner. And that happens when you think about what are the events and what's important to them.
Yeah, especially the point you mentioned, and this is a mistake that I've seen even us do, sometime back, and also our customers do, is not thinking of these events as a campaign, right? Because you sort of, it's not an activity where you can just show up at a location and sort of ad hoc speak to people and book some meetings. It needs like an end-to-end process, event, during event, and post event, and that is a lot of work actually if you have to do it right. So that's like one revelation I've had over the years, working with our team in general.
Yeah, you have to be intentional about it, right? Like you have to. You're going to spend a lot of time and money on these events.
Right.
How do you become super intentional about what you're doing there?
Yeah.
And how do you templatize too?
Yes.
As well, right? Like that's huge. Is how do you make templates? How do you use AI?
Right.
AI is huge now. You can do so much with follow-up from these conversations that you couldn't do before. Like you don't need to sit down for 40 minutes and craft a well thought out email, right? You have, we call it the intern or the thought leader, which is ChatGPT. You have that at your hand. You can say, here are the top opportunities. Here are the points that X person cared about. Here's what's in the pipeline for them. Here's what I would like to get out of it. You can get an email follow-up in 30 seconds. So like, how do we look a lot around, like, how do we use AI too? How are we using it across our business for some of these things that were more manual and took people a longer amount of time now?
That's a great point. And the other point you mentioned early on is about the localization aspect that gets involved in sort of really trickling these campaigns down to the local regions, so that it doesn't come from a corporate office who doesn't understand the nuances of the local sort of regions. How does that process exactly work? So is there like a local team who takes these campaigns and sort of figures out how do you localize that content across web, across social, or like what would your guidance be for marketing teams who are trying to figure out how do we expand internationally with a global team in place?
Yeah, I think my first piece of advice is to test into it. That
Mm.
would be my first piece of advice, is start a pilot. People aren't scared of the word pilot.
Mm.
A lot of times you can throw out the word pilot and people be like, oh, okay, we'll test it. Like, gives people the opportunity to, have a little bit more fun with it. And there's that whole theory of like failing fast, because they're like, oh, okay, we'll try this. It's not like as high stakes as a project. So I would say you test into it. So for us right now, we're testing in Germany. It's one of the biggest, largest mainframe markets, but what we know is that they need to be spoken to in the language. So what we're saying is, okay, how do we, at the back half of this year in Q4 and in 2025, build out this strategy? What does the landing experience look like? Because we already have the messaging, we already have the broader value prop of what this campaign
Right.
is. Now, how do you translate that working with your local sales teams, your local product teams? That's really important to say, what would this look like on a web experience? What would this look like in paid advertisements? What would the follow-up cadence be from sales? Because it has to be in that language too. So the handoff, you can't go just in German and then hand off to a US or an English speaking or sales aid rep. You need to be in that language. So we're saying, how do we build this out in a way that also goes all the way through, but that's measurable? Because we
Right.
might find, right, that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, we might go all through all this and be like, oh, okay, well, the ROI isn't there. But if you say that you're going to pilot something, you're going to test something, it gives you that foundation to learn. And then hopefully this is really successful. We can say, okay, how do we bring this into France? How do we bring this into, we're already doing some things in Australia, but how do we bring this potentially into the Philippines? Like, that way it allows you to move into different markets, learn, and every single time I'll continue to go back. The more that we can have templates and frameworks for teams to follow, it takes away some of the fear of starting something new, right? Like, everyone always says a blank piece of paper is so fear-inducing. But if you don't have that, you'd be like, oh, I can just adapt this to my market. That's
Right.
always our goal, is like, how do you come up with templates that people can leverage to make it easier as well?
That's a very fair point. Yeah. And the other thing, Audrey, is that since Rocket Software obviously has evolved over the years, right? I'm sure you would have repositioned the company from one place to another. Like, you so many products right now in general. Any learnings? Because a lot of companies go through this journey of expanding their market potential from one place to another, and during that exercise, they have to reposition the entire company and how they think of themselves both internally and externally. Any learnings on how sort of to do that exercise right, to sort of make it work well?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a few things that you need to do. So we have rebranded. We rebranded 2 years ago.
Mm.
We went from one way of thinking of ourselves, and then we were really pushing the direct market focus. So we redid our logos, we redid our brand story, we did our values haven't changed, but we've upped our values a little bit. We've looked at it, like, what is that mission, and really thinking holistically about the brand and how do we come to market with that. Then we did a big acquisition in the May timeframe, where we acquired a part of the open text business, AMC,
Right.
and pulled that in too. So now that has an existing brand. It
Mm.
used to be part of the Micro Focus brand.
Right.
So how does that wrap through? So we've been doing a lot of figuring out how to craft that story. How do we bring that story to the marketplace? How do we then bring that story to customers?
Mm.
How do you understand what's going to resonate? So I think you do that through a few different ways.
Mm.
You have to go back to, how do you learn? So you learn either from what customers are currently saying in NPS surveys or any sorts of CSAT surveys. How do you pull that into your talk track? You think about, I don't know if they still use this term. We used to use this term about double jacking in. That's when we used to have phones. We no longer have phone cords anymore. But what the whole idea was, that you would listen in on customer conversations, and that's how you would learn. So how can you join sales calls to understand how you could pull what their storylines is and what customers think about Rocket already into that? And I think as we came up with the holistic brand story, we tested it a lot. We brought it into focus groups. We brought it into tools. There's a tool called Neurons. which I don't know if you've ever heard of, but you can actually put your advertising and your message into it, and it will show you the emotions that pulls out of a respondent. And where their eyes goes and what they look at. So we would actually, when we were going through the logo process, we put the logo in and said, like, where are their eyes going? What are they looking at? What is the emotions that are coming across? And I think for me, the biggest piece of thinking about when you're rolling out a brand is that you always start internally. You make sure that everyone can say what the brand story is. You make sure that everyone can stand up and do a 5-pager is what we've called it. And you say, okay, this is how we represent ourselves as a brand. Then you go into the marketplace. And so that everyone internally feels it and they're part of it and they know how to represent it. So the moment that you're starting to go out into the external marketplace and using thought leadership and analysts and your paid media strategies and everything that you're doing around that message is already resonating internally and coming out in sales pitches. So I think there's a successful way of having employees own it first, of testing with your own customers just to make sure that it is resonating, pulling in feedback into that brand story from what you're hearing in the marketplace. And then as you're in the marketplace, continually adapting that story based on what you see is resonating.
Right. And also the other point that I'm sure you would advocate for is that this is not like a one and done exercise, right? It needs like a 2-year investment and sort of what people call it, like drumming the same beat again and again in multiple places, multiple different channels to keep that working, right? But people sometimes think it's a one and done exercise and you can sort of move on, but it's not, right?
So. Oh, no, you have to, what do they say? If you want us to hear something 7 times in order to remember it, right? So you have to keep saying things over and over again and keep showing up. And so even going back to our events discussion, how do you show up in those events? What is the presentation? And then also what I was saying before is like, you're going to learn things along the way. You're going to learn that maybe that word people are confused about, whatever that word was, or whatever parts of your story people might need to understand. So at Rocket, we're modernization without disruption. We got to that point from being really thoughtful, talking to our customers and seeing what their strategic conversations were. And we're going to continue with that talk track. As we meet with customers and we hear more from them, to your point, we're going to continue to pull other nuggets into that, other pieces into our value prop. So it's a continual iteration. And then also just from a rebranding perspective, that takes years, right? Like if you're a 34-year-old company, that takes you a year and a half to touch all the different places to make sure it's a consistent customer experience.
That's a good point. Yeah, because you'll have years of content also in place that has to be refreshed and to the new message and new value props. Wow, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and you have all that product documentation and you have different portals for different people. And so you just need to make sure that you don't have, we did a lot of that of like, what was the audit? What do we need to look at? What do we need to update?
That's a great point. On that point of view, would love to hear about like a campaign or a launch that you're sort of proud of in the last several years at Rocket Software, since the company has sort of evolved over the years and has like a bigger team right now to actually focus on a few things. Anything that comes to your mind from a campaign launch standpoint?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. First, we already talked about the brand campaign. That was huge. That was a big piece. And it's so important, especially for brand building, to have that long-term view, to have a long-term brand strategy, because it impacts the short-term demand gen. We can probably talk hours about that, but it really does. So like first, that brand is so important. What do you do at the awareness level? What I'm really excited about is what we're doing now in the demand generation and demand capture areas. We are moving towards less of a single threaded lead. And what I can explain what that means to more of an account-based lead and an account-based buying group. So traditionally, previously, we would do things like content syndication, or we would do single webinars, and we would take all the people that attended and we would put them into a lead flow, and they'd score based on different models, and then they would get handed off to sales. And you'd have Fred from X company who talked about this one product. But you're missing the other 11 to 17 people that are also working in X company. So, and a lot of those times our conversion rates were lower. Our conversion rates on overall were, in the 15s to 17%. So over the last year, we've said, okay, how do we rebuild this in a different way? How do we rebuild repeatable and predictable pipeline, and know how to stick and focus on the full buyer group. So now what we do is we use a lot of intent tools. One of our main tools is 6sense that we leverage. And we say, okay, looking at this account, let's make sure that there's at least 5 buyers and part of that buyer group on this account that we're engaging with. Until we're engaging with that many, we're not handing it off to sales because it's going to be single threaded. Let's make sure we know exactly what that conversation needs to be. Are they looking at our security solution? Are they looking at our hybrid cloud solution? Are they looking at our skills solution? How do we then say, okay, now this is ready for sales, and we're handing that off, and sales can then act upon it with the right messaging, the right materials. They know at least 4 people, 5 people on that account, including the right VP levels that they need to have a discussion with. And that's what we're piloting right now, right? Using that word pilot again, because we were allowed to, kind of work through a different model that the sales team isn't used to, but we're doing that right now. We're seeing a lot of opportunities come through that we haven't before, because we might have missed it because we were just doing these single threaded. And because of that, we've been able to increase our conversion rate from about 17% to this month, it was 35%. Wow. And we've done that in 1 year. So I'm really excited about that, because on top of that, with the brand campaign, the brand awareness, we have that surround sound approach. So we're really focused on these target accounts, and based on those target accounts, we can then say, okay, we make sure that they see us throughout their whole entire journey. If they're on a peer review site, if they're looking on like one of the publications, like a Financial Times or Forbes, that we're there and we're top of mind.
This is a good point. So, as you move from this model of just lead to account and account buying groups and stuff, are there any difference in the activities and touch points your team does to engage them, or has it been fairly similar from an just like activities, touch points, and what kinds of efforts that the team puts in?
Yeah, I think there is a difference. There's a difference based on the target, I would say. So it's going to vary by solution, but now that we're going after this VP executive level, the goal is no longer about what executive is going to really fill out a form on the website, right? That's not the goal anymore. The goal is like, how do you get a meeting? That becomes the touch point. How do you get a really meaningful, what is the give to them? I was talking about that this morning. How do you make sure that's something really meaningful? So if it's the head of a big company, your conversation going into is not like, do you want a demo? Your conversation is, do you want to have a strategic roadmap conversation? And we can bring our CIO, and we can bring our CTO and a CRO, and we will sit with you and help you plan out your next year on your modernization journey. And it goes back to that partnership that I was talking about earlier. Like, that is what the give is. It's no longer like fill out a form on our website, because that's not gonna resonate with this target at all. So the list becomes smaller that you focus on, but ideally it becomes a bigger revenue impact.
Right. And the offer, like you said, becomes very tailored to that particular persona of VP, and you sort of go after them across different channels to ensure that they see your brand and sort of build that surround, and that word that you used, like surround approach, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And for lower level, there are some products that we still have a lower level, but you say, okay, maybe this is a more direct path for that manager level. I'm going to point them to a website. I'm going to allow them to be able to procure it themselves too. How do I look at digital storefronts that they could just procure it themselves? So it takes away from those lower price point deals. They can swipe a credit card or do something like that, so that the sales team only focuses on those larger deals.
Right. And there was one point you mentioned, and you spoke about this, that obviously brand investment is important, but it does sometimes take a hit on the short-term demand initiatives, right? How do you guide teams to prioritize between both? Because to your point, both of them are equally important, right? And it looks like as time progresses, brand seems to be a lot more important, because how crowded markets can get and how many players are in each market, and it's important to sort of make the brand stand out. What will your guidance be on, like, how do you prioritize both these investments?
So what we talk about with the team is there was a really great LinkedIn conference that happened last year, and they had this phrase about performance branding, and I loved that because it took both of them together. It took performance marketing, it took brand. I was like, oh, I love that so much. And we talked to our team about becoming memory makers. That is the key. You need to be a memory maker because you need to be on what we call the day one list, which is, you know, the top 5 companies that you have already in your mind. It's like when you go buy running shoes. Like I have my brand. I know what I'm going to go after. I'm going to go after New Balance, partly because I'm a New England kid, but I'm also just like, I know that's my brand. Like that's what I'm going to go after. You do the same thing when you have a software purchase. You have your top 4 companies that you're going to go after. So how do we make sure that we're one of those companies? And that is partly because of being a memory maker and being in that place. So we talk about how it's so important because without that, people don't know who we are as a brand. And it's so much more important because we are a new go-to-market, new direct motion. People didn't know who Rocket was before, you know, even 6 years ago. Our unaided awareness was down in the 10s, and we're up to, you know, high 20s at this point. Like we've done a lot of work to get to a really solid place. But you need to make sure that you're top of mind, and that comes with brand building. And you also can use things like multi-touch attribution and look at those tools and say, okay, when we're in market with brand, we can see that there's a huge uptick in organic search. So you can start to show that back, especially like we use a Visible, which is a Marketo measure. And we show, okay, when we're in brand market with all of our brand messaging, you see a huge uptick actually in organic search. And what people are doing. So we know that we're top of mind and that people are out there. And I think if you can bring that back to the team too, and say, just talk about how important it is to be those memory makers so that when the sales team's walking in, we're already top of mind. And then longer term, you start to show how does that then impact revenue? And that comes by using a multi-touch attribution model.
Right. You know, it's interesting that you say that what you're advocating for is that it's no longer an either or question, but both of them sort of work together very well. That if you do brand very well and if you become the memory maker, it'll automatically translate into demand in terms of shortlisting you as a vendor when they look at things in the first place, right? And I was looking at a post yesterday, and somebody was saying that the research, even from Forrester and Gartner, the number of shortlists that vendors get, like even that is coming down. Like folks who used to shortlist 5 vendors before are now only doing like 2 vendors as a shortlist going forward because they can do so much research before they even come to the sales process. It was fascinating to just hear about the fact that, hey, look, oh wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean the buying complexity has changed so much.
Right.
I think, right? Like people are doing 80% of the research before they even talk to anyone.
Right.
Just I think about it as I think about B2B a lot, how I think about B2C, because I've worked in both. And you're still people.
Right.
You're still like the people that we're working with, we're still working with a consumer. So they're still using a lot of the traits that they do for looking for a car or looking for running shoes. If I go back to that they would do in their day to day. They're still looking online. They're still like reading the peer review sites. They're still like talking to all their friends, being like, what new car do you like now that I just did this when I had my second kid, right? What's car has the third row? Like that's what you do. And you do the same thing when you're making complex enterprise software decisions too. You're talking to your other CTO friends. You're reading Gardner. You're doing all this because the last thing you want is probably what we all get, which is a million phone calls. Right? Like from all the different, like the phone calls aren't working and the email's not working. So like you need to make sure that you're, like I said, that top of mind and that you have the executive level relationships and the partnerships so that they go to you. So you get that you're on that, you know, that number 2. So exactly. Exactly.
Right. On the point, so what's sort of your thinking around how like content will evolve in general? Because to your point, as a brand, you have to be present across these different channels so that it's easier for the buyers to consume your content. Do you think video will become a lot more important going forward? Like, what is sort of your in general opinion on how content marketing, etc., will change in the next few years with video, AI, etc., etc.?
Yeah. So I think video has been important since it came on. right? Like I used to work at an ad agency, and this was years ago. So
Right.
we used to always say, "Where's your video assets?" Because we knew that those perform better. And this was 10 years ago. It was
Right.
right when like rich media units, which now I'm dating myself, it was 10, 15 years
Right.
ago. We're like, oh, yeah, you can show videos in advertising online. And that was like the first time that we said, okay, let's do this. We always see that all the video outperforms our static or any sort of animation every single time. I think that we try to leverage it a lot more. And with AI, there's a lot more ways to get content now.
Yes.
There's so many ways to get content. It's silly if people aren't using it, because I can throw in a white paper and say, cut this into an infographic, cut this
Right.
into a video script, cut this into a social post, cut this into an ad, and it will do it in 2 minutes.
100%. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so why wouldn't you? And why wouldn't you leverage video and leverage this interactive content more? People, I hate to say this, are like stopping reading as much, right? Like people will be like, oh, give me the 10 seconds, give me the 30 seconds. And so if you can capture something, the other day I saw something really interesting. It was someone had a podcast similar to what we're doing right here, but they had done, instead of the actual image, it was a video. It was a video, a talk track of what was going to happen. And I was like, oh, that's so engaging. That's such a better formula to grab someone's attention. So I'm 100% a video advocate. I think that the faster we can create, the faster the better. And especially as you think about, okay, what's the 10-second spot? What's the 15? What's the 30? People's overall attention span is hard to get right now. So how do you make it snackable?
Yes.
That people can just grab.
Consume, exactly. And the good point about video, to your point, is that video has so many, like it has transcript, it has an audio, it has like a short form video clip, so you can do a lot more, a long form video content with, especially with AI and stuff, like bunch of things you can do with just one video recording. So definitely something for content teams to consider as they repurpose and reuse a lot more of this video content.
Yeah, and figure out what works, right? Like I think that's why it was very intentional when we started to say, let's make sure that we have reporting and analytics with everything we do. I always say, if it doesn't have tracking, let's not do it, because we're just throwing money away. We are, like, you need to know what's working and you need to understand. So the best thing about video is you can look at completion rates. You can look when they drop off. You can say, okay, I don't need a 30-second spot. I need a 15-second, because no one's staying past minute 4 or 14 seconds. Like, and you can see that data in real time too. So one of the things that we like to look at is, on a weekly basis, we get together and we say, what do we see for results? And then how do you rapidly test that and change that and say, okay, this message or this creative is performing better. Let's do more of that. Let's get more human imagery in, because we've been actually seeing that the human imagery ads perform better than just the text ads, which makes sense. It goes back to my B2C. Like, people are still customers. They're still consumers. They want to see themselves, and they want to see like who, someone that represents them in advertisements, rather than just words and robots.
Correct. And stock images, right? That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
exactly.
Cool. Okay, one last question before I let you go. For listeners who are in the middle management marketing teams, right? What would your guidance be to sort of have, if they aspire to become like VPs and CMOs someday, like what would your guidance be for teams who want to get there eventually?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things. I would say find mentors early. Really do. Like, find a mentor early, someone that you admire, someone that you can learn from. Try to have a mix of them. I have a couple of them. It's just good to have a mix of, wherever you want to focus. I'd also say figure out what you want to do. Have some sort of career path and say, okay, this is what I want to do in the next 5 to 10 years. And then less about the roles. What are the skills that you need to get there? What do you need to build? And that kind of helps you. The other thing I would say is, like, raise your hand for stretch assignments. For stretch assignments.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yes. So stretch assignments. So if there is a stretch assignment, something that puts you in front of executive leadership, don't be scared. Just raise your hand, figure it out. It helps if you have a good mentor or a good sponsor that can help you in that process, but get yourself visible. as soon as possible and do something that you really think could impact the business.
So
Bring
true.
it back to like what could impact revenue or what would be a huge business outcome. Like if you see a problem, raise your hand to say like, I see a problem and I could see a big impact to our revenue if we fix this. Say like, I'd love to lead a tiger team or a war room to figure this out really quickly and come back to you with what 5 options to solve this could be.
Yeah.
So I think like that's really important.
Yeah, the idea about taking on these tough assignments is very key, because even if you fail, people will appreciate the effort that has gone into it, and you have some sort of a safety net, right? When you take on these massive projects. So I am a big fan of it, and I've actually heard it from many people. Like, raise your hand for like these big audacious projects, so that puts you at the center of the leadership team or the exec team.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're trying to solve something that no one else has solved yet.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's fine. Most likely you're not going to fail. You're going to get like 7 different ideas out of it. And I think that's the other thing too, is that if you want to put yourself in places that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, because that's the only way you're going to grow. If you always like stay safe, you're not going to grow. You're not going to get to that next level. But if you do stuff, if it doesn't scare you, then you're probably in a really safe spot.
Right. That's awesome. Okay, it's been a pleasure, Andrea. Thanks for entertaining all my questions and sort of being transparent about your answers and your learnings. Exciting. It looks like you guys are in an exciting phase of the journey in terms of scaling up the marketing team, scaling up the brand efforts, etc. So hoping to watch you from the sidelines. But thank you so much for taking the time again.
Thank you for having me. This was a wonderful time, and I look forward to talking to you more.